This is something I haven't done before, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be nice. So you better watch. I'm watching you. I'm watching you watch me. Inception of watching. Hey you guys, it's MJ and welcome back to Pet Adventures again. So today I am going to be doing something quite different that I've never done before. I don't think, maybe once or twice I've done this, but most of the time I don't really do these. So this is going to be, I think, my first official story time. I don't do these often, and if you guys do want to hear story times about certain things that I have done with different pets throughout my life that I've owned, or story times where I worked at the pet store, anything like that, well, pet stores, since I worked at quite a few. If you guys want story times on basically anything in my life involving pets, please let me know. There are so many stories with me and pets that I've owned since I was just a little child to now, and it's really awesome. So today is going to be my first official story time. And today's story time is going to be all about the very first time that I officially saved a reptile. So without further ado, let's get started. So this story time is actually about the very first time that I saved a reptile's life. Now, this was in 2015, I believe. I was working at my very first job, and I was only probably a few months into the job, maybe about 3 months into the job, and I was just starting to get used to things. And this is the exotic pet store that I worked at, so it was my first job and it was an exotic pet store. So I'm not going to try to expose this place because that's not what this story is about. This place that I worked at, I'm not going to get into how they took care of their animals, but basically we did not have a vet that we used for our animals, and a lot of the animals, I guess, would kind of just get set back in the back room, and we wouldn't really be able to do much to them since we didn't have a vet, or so they thought, I suppose. But they had a Uromastyx at the time. There was actually 2 Uromastyx that they were keeping at the time. And if you guys know anything, my actual favorite reptile in the entire world are Uromastyx lizards. Now, not everybody knows what kind of lizards those are. They're not very common to keep. They're very similar looking to a bearded dragon, if a bearded dragon didn't have any spikes on them and were smaller, I suppose you could say. I forget what it was at the time, but I remember knowing at the exact time what kind of Uromastyx it was, but I think it was the yellow Niger. I think it was the Niger Uromastyx, now that I think about it. Anyway, that's not exactly the important part of this, but basically they had 2 Uromastyx that lived together, and one of them had a very slow, painful death. So after I saw that, I guess I was like, wow, this is really sad. So that was just heartbreaking to me. So when I first saw that Uromastyx die, I saw that the other one was getting just as sick. If I hadn't done anything, he would have had the exact same fate as his little tank mate. So after his tank mate died, I didn't want him to have the same fate. So I didn't know anything about Uromastyx. I was still new to pet keeping at the time. I was just getting into collecting pets, and a lot of the pets that I have came from this store, and I of course rehabilitated them and kept them, but you know, I was still very new, so I was still in the stage where I was making tons of mistakes. I didn't know how to take care of pets just yet. I was still just into researching all the time. I don't research like I used to because I obviously know a lot more than I used to when it comes to specific reptiles and fish and things like that. So I went home and I researched absolutely everything you need to know about uromastyx care. I studied different types of uromastic care. They're all kind of the same for the most part. And everything I could possibly study on this uromastyx, I studied. So I think it took about maybe 2 weeks worth of research. I still was researching a lot as he progressed, but when I felt like I knew enough, I went back to work, and my initial thing that I was going to try to do, I was going to see if I could bring it back home with me. The store that I worked at, they had a lot of things that were not restricted, so a lot of pets you could donate there if you didn't want them anymore, and a lot of pets you could actually take home. If you wanted to, you could take it home, rehabilitate it, and bring it back. They really didn't care about that kind of stuff. So which is not a bad thing. If you're working with people who you see are professionals, you see that they keep a lot of reptiles, things like that. But I ended up not taking it back to my house because I felt I did not have the space, because when I researched uromastyx, they need a minimum of, I think it's like 40 gallons. So you see this tank behind me, you could get something like that for uromastyx when they're older, but no less. So I'm like, yeah, I don't have the space for another 40 gallon. I got a 40 gallon at the store that I worked at. It was like an Exoterra type 40 gallon. So I ended up switching the uromastyx from what they were in to a 40 gallon. So that's the first thing that I did. So I took this little guy and I looked in the back at all the bedding that we carried, and I gave him some of the most suitable stuff I could give him. So they originally had him on, what was it? It was like, I don't even remember what it was. It was like some weird seed mix or something like that. But anyways, that was the first thing to go. I gave him just a normal substrate. So just something regular, like if you wanted to, like basically nothing that can carry humidity. It sounds a little funny, but the uromastyx comes from the hottest parts of Saudi Arabia. So you can imagine these guys do not need humidity. In fact, humidity was the first thing to go. No humidity in the tank. So that's what I had learned. And then after that, I realized that these guys they needed such low humidity. I believe it was like 15% or 5%, I'm not really sure. But again, these guys live in the hottest parts of the desert, so that's why they actually need to not have humidity. So I actually found out that they didn't need a water bowl, so I took that away. I know it sounds crazy, but the little guy ended up not ever having a water bowl, and everything was fine. So that was something that went too. So I gave him a substrate with no humidity and then no water bowl. And then I had found out that they were feeding this little guy a lot of insects, and apparently they're just herbivores. Now, I believe that they do eat the insects because of instinct. I believe that the uromastyx probably would eat an insect if you put it in front of them, just because it's pure instinct for survival. But they don't need it, and in fact, it's probably best that you stay away from it. And the crickets that we had, in my opinion, weren't that great. They were not very healthy crickets, so that took into account too. So I had to kind of remind every associate, don't feed them insects, don't feed them any of that. And I basically told them, don't worry about taking care of this uromastyx because this is going to be my job. Often I would come on my days off to go check on the uromastyx. So those were the first few things I did, and then I ended up they needed 100 degrees at least. So I believe I gave him like a 150, which is actually okay. I ended up giving him a very, very hot bulb and a UV. He had not even had UV for his bones and such. So no UV, and the heat bulb was not near hot enough. So I ended up doing that. And then throughout the process, I was taking pictures of him. I actually did give him a name. I named him Raphael. I ended up giving him a name, and I basically was giving him, I looked up the best calcium you could give him. I got Herptivite for him, and I ended up putting it on all his leafy greens. I was feeding him as much good leafy greens as I could. I think I even got something for him at the store, and then I brought it to the store because I believed that it was best to just do that. So this was just such an important thing to me, you guys. I worked on this kind of project slash, it's like save a life project, I guess. I don't know. But I worked on this for, I think, a month or two, and within 2 months, he started getting better and better. He fattened up, he became lighter in color, which meant that he was feeling better, of course, too. And he actually, he started becoming very active, very responsive. He ate all his leafy greens all the time. And, you know, I would dust the Herptivite calcium on there. And over time, he just kept getting better and better. And so, in case you guys are wondering, I even know what happened to the Uromastyx. I was really hoping that no one would sell him except for me. The reason why is because I didn't trust anybody else giving like a good care sheet to him or something like that. Or I had hoped that whoever bought him would already be like really experienced with reptiles. And that is exactly what happened. So Raphael, if I can find any pictures of him, I will. I know that I took pictures of him, but I don't know if I can get those pictures back because it was a long time ago. But if I can't get pictures of Raphael, I will find some pictures that look like him for this video. But basically, Raphael went to a really good home. He went to a great home. I actually met his owner a few days later after he got sold. I was really worried when I found out he got sold and I wasn't the one who sold him, because I don't blame anyone for not knowing anything about your Uromastyx care. I mean, who in the world would think that? Like, but the thing is like, I'd worked so hard to get him healthy. I was hoping that I could give him a really good home. So luckily he went to an experienced reptile keeper. I actually saw Raphael, like I didn't see him, but I saw pictures of him, and I saw where he ended up. The guy kept him in a really huge tank. It was not even a 40 or 50 gallon tank. I forgot how much it was, but it was way bigger than that. And he had proper substrate, very dry environment. The guy was feeding him on bok choy and all kinds of nice leafy greens, and he knew about the 100-degree that they needed, and he was very experienced. He was apparently a reptile breeder, so that was really cool. So that is the story of how I saved a lizard's life. This was probably the first ever real life I ever saved. I'm not gonna say I saved every life. There's a lot of times when I fail when it comes to animals, but there are a lot of rewarding times when I haven't failed. And this was probably the most beautiful and wonderful thing I have ever done for an animal. I could not stand to see such a beautiful little lizard, and not to mention that this was my favorite lizard in the entire world. I hated seeing these guys die. And this exact thing happened with a couple of like bearded dragons and leopard geckos. Luckily, this was just an environmental thing. If you ever have an animal that you think is sick, the first thing you need to do, change the environment. Do a lot of research, I mean like a ton of research on what kind of environment a certain animal should have, and change the environment immediately. At least from my experience, that always works. I remember when I used to have Igor, when he was really sick at one point, and I really thought he was just gonna die at this time, we instantly changed his environment. We gave him more moisture in his substrate, and we ended up changing his heat. His heat was on for a lot longer throughout the day. He got a lot more heat intake, and then we also took him to the vet for his tail, and all of that changed. So changing the environment is the first thing you want to do, and sometimes that doesn't always work, and in that case you have to go to the vet. Always take that into account. Sometimes even your veterinarian will ask, if you have a reptile or something like that, or any animal, they will ask you what is your environment? They will ask you that because there's so many things that a vet can't do for your animal if your environment just isn't correct. So, you know, and when I say correct, I don't mean like stereotypical correct. Like, if you want to do some things that are different for your animal, by all means do it. As long as it doesn't hurt your animal or kill your animal in any way, you have every right to do something a little different that other people don't do. But when it comes to really technical things like lighting and heating, you do need to have that spot on. So thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in to my time of heaven, I guess you could say. It was so rewarding that when I came home after I found out that Raph was gonna live, and I knew he was doing great and that he got nice and fat and active, and when I found out that I had saved that animal's life, I was just at peace. So I hope that something like this happens to you guys one day, because it is such a rewarding feeling for any animal that you can save like that. So yeah, that was my time of saving a Eurymastix lizard that came into my life. Definitely something I was meant to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and give this video a big thumbs up, especially if you love pets, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!